Hello, and thank you for joining this webinar hosted by TNS and Juniper Research to assess call spoofing and its impact on both enterprises and consumers. So I'm Sam Barker, VP of Telecoms Market Research here at Juniper. Joining me today is Maury Monroe, Vice President of Enterprise Sales at TNS.
Thank you, Sam.
Thank you for joining, Maury. And I'm just going to quickly take you through the agenda of what we're going to be talking about today, and more importantly, what questions we're going to answer in the course of this webinar. But before we continue and we get into the content at hand, I'd just like to point you towards the content button on the right of the webinar platform. If there are any questions during the webinar for either Maury or myself, please do put those in the box and we will answer them at the end of the webinar. So what are we going to be going over today? First of all, we'd like to introduce call spoofing, provide a definition of what exactly is occurring, what are the latest trends, and very importantly, how AI is impacting fraudulent activity that arises from call spoofing. And we're also going to be looking at some of the technologies that are looking to improve the situation, such as branded calling, and how that benefits consumers and enterprises as well. And as I just said, we'll be ending on a question and answer session after the slides are done. So let's just move straight into it. So what is call spoofing? So call spoofing is in part down to social engineering, essentially changing the phone number that's displayed to the mobile subscriber in order to trick that mobile subscriber into believing that the call is originating from somewhere that it's not, normally from a trusted enterprise or person with fraudulent intentions, essentially. Now, this can be for trusted sources like banks or healthcare providers that typically consumers like to, the consumers will trust and will work with on a regular basis, but more importantly, have access to sensitive information like financial information or health records. And call spoofing, as we know, comes with bad intentions, often for a legal financial gain. But more importantly, what this webinar will be going through is the impacts of call spoofing, and most importantly, how that goes towards enterprises and consumers alike. So it's not just how call spoofing can impact the mobile subscriber and who is receiving the call, but also who's not involved in the call spoofing process. So, for example, the enterprise being spoofed. There are a lot of trends that we're going to go through in this webinar, and the impacts of how Juniper Research's investigation into call spoofing the market for fraudulent activity and the tools that can help combat fraudulent activity, and we're going to explore in this webinar exactly how that occurs. So from Juniper Research, the trends that we've noted is what you can see here is the total number of fraudulent calls on the right globally. Most importantly, North America accounts for the highest amount of we've identified robocalls there, but it also comes from many different sources. It's not just robocalls; it can come from direct calling, but the impacts are the same regardless. There is an element to call spoofing of social engineering, the ability for the fraudulent players to essentially mask themselves as someone who is trusted, with the intention of gaining access to a financial account or to healthcare records, essentially for nefarious purposes. But what is important is in this element of social engineering that even though everyone is open to this sort of fraud, there are more vulnerable groups, most notably the elderly, for example, those who are less conscious of technology, who are more vulnerable to these sort of attacks and not necessarily have the information or the knowledge or the experience to identify by themselves what could be a potentially fraudulent call. One of the key takeaways that Juniper Research has promoted is being that even though there are these vulnerable groups, education is needed for everyone. The idea that call spoofing will only impact a certain number of people, or from a consumer's point of view, thinking that you would never fall for a scam like that. We'll go through a few slides in a moment just to prove that everyone is open to it. That the fraudulent players, the fraudsters, so to speak, are becoming more ingenious with their tactics, and being tech savvy, so to speak, is not enough. Technology or solutions at the technology level are massively important to reinstilling that trust within the voice channel. There are frameworks in place for many different areas, but as the problem itself is so complex and can be attacked from many different angles, it's very important that these solutions, these technologies that are being identified are able to tackle the problem at heart. But one of the main takeaways from Juniper Research's latest report into this sort of area is that there is no one-size-fits-all approach from a regional standpoint or a country-level standpoint. There are many frameworks, for example, in the US, which has been a leading player, a leading country in tackling these call spoofing trends, and through technological implementations and frameworks. We've seen from other countries in places like Europe and Asia Pacific that it's not essentially taking the frameworks that the US have been led with and moving forward, but it's about the solution at heart, essentially. And we'll be exploring that in a bit more detail. But to move on to how, or to build upon how fraudsters can target everyone and how fraud is evolving, we only need to look much further than AI. I think a lot has been made in the media about AI and what it can do, but in the context of call spoofing and essentially completing fraud, there's a lot there. So AI's use within the call spoofing space is becoming much more prevalent. What you're seeing now is essentially AI voice clones, voice bots, many different names for it, but the ability to take a small recording, and it really isn't that much of an individual maybe known to the user that you're trying to scam, and being able to replicate that voice in a very believable way, as well as understand the responses to this voice bot, mean that it's not just the least tech savvy amongst mobile subscribers, phone users that are open to this type of fraud. Being able to understand and respond to the person taking the call in real time can be indistinguishable from speaking to the person themselves. It's something that's been in the news for a number of years, and I think there was a bit of fear mongering, but from our research we can tell that this technology is very much being used today by fraudsters, and it's just one element within the call spoofing market that is sort of taking off, and is another element, another attack vector, so to speak, that needs to be handled. The other side is obviously voice itself plays a role within the omni-channel space, the omni-channel communication space, and we're seeing that AI is being used across all different channels, voice obviously being one of them as well, and it makes those fraudulent attacks more believable. It makes the mobile subscribers more susceptible to that fraud, and it's something that even the most technologically minded mobile subscribers need to be aware of. In fact, from Juniper Research's in Juniper Research's opinion, it's something that is moved beyond what many people, the average mobile subscriber or the average user, thinks is possible today and can happen, which means really in sort of real terms they can be open to fraud. So what we're going to do now, we're going to go through the technologies that are in there. So one thing, we are going to differentiate this from caller name delivery. That only works on wireline networks, and we will be talking about branded calling, which goes over wireless networks, wireless phones. So on the right there, you can see an example of how branded calling works. We've used Juniper Research there as an example. They've got the logo, the name, and in some instances the reason for the call before the call has even been answered. Now, this obviously instills trust. The main reason being that with the right solution, that call and the logo and the name is verified. So if the user is obviously knows the company and knows that company is being verified, they have much more trust in the call and the content of that call, and therefore are more likely to pick up. That's going to increase call pickup rates for the enterprises as they do. But for this to work, one of the things that is most important, obviously, is partnerships. There's a long value chain between the enterprise and the mobile subscriber, including operators, identity vendors, and third parties that need to all be heading in the same direction for this service to work. And for this service to work, what needs to happen is these stakeholders need to align, and if they don't, then the value of this proposition is not going to be as high as it can be for mobile subscribers. But as I said before, the US is a leading player in this, or a leading country, should I say, in the development of these sort of branded calling solutions. And we're seeing it already in the US. And even though the frameworks may vary, I think other countries and regulators in other countries are seeing the initial successes and the initial benefits that these solutions are bringing. And we're seeing more and more regulatory bodies bring similar services into their own country level ecosystems. So now what I'd like to do is just very quickly talk about the industry opportunity for branded calling. So voice channels and subsequently branded calling, it's essential to a lot of industries. I think if you just talk about the voice channel in general, just give a few examples there. The top two, financial and healthcare. Now, those two are probably the most likely to be spoofed because they have the most sensitive information, or the information that's most beneficial to the fraudulent players. Obviously, financial market is a very good example of this. What you can see there is that a fraudster could be able to take control of an account takeover fraud, get access to bank accounts and obviously the money within it. There are many instances and many examples of that happening over the last few years. But if we look to the graph to the right of the losses to robocalling, although this will apply to other areas as well, we can see that North America accounts for over half of the global losses to robocalling fraud from our Juniper Research's latest research into the market. But the main driver for that is, and to use a phrase that is very apt, but not one of my personal favorites, but fraud goes where the money flows. The US is the most affluent country in the world, and it's easier to hide sort of fraudulent activity in areas with high amounts of traffic. So it's no surprise really that the US is, and North America in general is, the country to suffer most from some call spoofing fraud or fraud that comes from call spoofing, should I say. And one of the other elements that we sort of just want to mention as well is harking back to the omni-channel element of communications. Is voice plays a role within omni-channel. There are other areas such as like messaging. Messaging is a good example, and I'd like to bring up RCS business messaging, which has a very similar approach to branded calling. Two distinct areas, different approaches, but essentially the same end goal, which is branded messaging or branded calling or essentially branded traffic, verified sender ID. So the end user knows who they are, or confident that they are speaking to the people that they think they are speaking to. Essentially, what that's doing is creating a similar customer experience for the end user. Having branding, having a verified tick, so to speak, or a different visual cue upon communicating on the phone. Essentially, by the end of the communication, that consumer, that mobile subscriber, the customer of the enterprise is essentially very confident that the information that they've given out or the information they've shared is shared with the enterprise or business that they think they are speaking to. Overall, short-term customer experience is going to go up, and long-term, as the branded calling becomes more and more pervasive, more and more obvious, consumers are more aware of it, the voice channel itself, the value of the voice channel itself will increase as well. So we've talked about what the value of the branded calling is for everyone. Let's just specifically focus on the enterprises now. So we believe that the value of this branded calling, cannot be understated for enterprises. It's very, very valuable. Essentially, it enables them to unify their branding across all of their different channels. It essentially provides an immediate visual cue to the subscriber that the brand that they're speaking to is who they say they are, and over time that will increase the call pickup rates. Now, one thing Juniper Research has noted, and you can see to the graph to the right, is this is the number of voice calls over mobile networks or wireless networks over the next 5 years. What you can see is it is going down, but down to a number of factors. Generational changes, different demographics have different communication preferences, but that is based on the assumption that this decline, that for instance, branded calling might not have the impact that it can. Those numbers, those forecasts could change over time as branded calling. It really has an impact, and enterprises start using the voice channel more and more. The other side, the other impact for enterprises in the using branded calling is obviously there's going to be a reduced cost in sort of their outbound communications, as call pickup rates can be quite low for some instances, because as a mobile subscriber, I think many of us have done it in the past, where you see a phone call, you're not 100% sure on who is calling and who it will be, so you don't pick up the phone. You let them leave a message, you let them leave a voicemail, and you get them back. But if there is branded calling, what enterprises can expect is those call pickup rates, especially for first-time calls, to increase. And over time, that's going to reduce the expenditure and time as well spent on multiple phone calls to subscribers as well. And on top of that, obviously, with upselling opportunities, if a consumer is more confident who they're speaking to, they're probably going to be more confident in increasing their spend with a particular brand if they're very confident that they're speaking to the right people. In a similar way that when a company visits a website, a person visits a website, they're more confident that they can they're using the website, they know that that's the address, it's verified to them, so they're happy to use their own money to purchase goods through. But on top of the enterprises, we also want to start looking at the value of branded calling for mobile subscribers. Obviously, we've talked about the visual cues of that, but obviously the main benefit for mobile subscribers is the fact that they will have more confidence that they're not going to be part of a fraudulent attempt to steal their money or gain access to their bank accounts, because they have more trust in the call. For example, if you're a mobile subscriber with a healthcare provider, you can have more confidence in speaking to your healthcare provider about confidential information rather than answering a call with no branded calling whatsoever. What we've got to the right there is the losses, and I think that just sort of highlights the two things. One, the impact of branded calling and how it is reducing those losses. From an analyst point of view, what I've noticed from Juniper Research's forecast, that even though those average losses are remaining relatively stable, the actual number of successful attempts at gaining access to financial information is actually going down because of the impact of these frameworks. It's interesting to see how this market is going to develop. And also for one thing that is very important, we didn't put the losses to enterprises on the previous slide. That's mainly because it's incredibly difficult to actually work out how much damage call spoofing can do to an enterprise, short term and long term. There's obviously not just the time and cost to sort out a problem, but there's also things like the damage to brand reputation, which is often, I don't use the word immeasurable lightly. It can be pretty disastrous in some instances. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to talk about the actual value of branded calling and what that means. And what we put there is sort of the spend on branded calling services, throughout the ecosystem, just to highlight how much we expect it to grow over the next 5 years. Pretty staggering spend. It goes up, from around 120 million to 2.3 billion globally over the next few years. Obviously, some growth in North America as well, but we're expecting countries in Europe and the Asia Pacific region as well to sort of see the success that the US is having and roll out their own services as well. But on top of that, there's obviously going to be a few other things that we think are going to drive this growth. Obviously, one of them is more operator support. As more and more carriers, more and more operators begin supporting this, we're going to see more branded calls essentially on mobile devices, and obviously more adoption from businesses as well. I think the branded calling element is going to go away from being it would be nice to have to a must-have within a very short space of time for enterprises. Obviously, apart from that, just to highlight that global growth again, it's going to be a very substantial element. And lastly, we just want to talk about spoof prevention, for branded calling. We do want to mention from Juniper Research's point of view that the branded calling is not this, it's not a fraud mitigation solution in itself, but it does help identify legitimate interactions between enterprises and consumers. It does help it does put the average mobile subscriber, essentially an enterprise's customer, business's customer, in a position where they can best mitigate their own social engineering, their own risks of social engineering, and that's a very, very important tool. But one thing that Juniper Research would also like to note is that what we call the cyclical nature of fraud, which is highlighted there to the right. Essentially, you could start anywhere on that graph and work your way around, but I'll start in the top right, which is a new fraud tactic is developed. In the instance of call spoofing, you can masquerade a phone number as something that it's not. It causes an impact. A solution is developed to tackle that, and when that becomes ineffective, the fraudsters then becomes unprofitable for them. They move on to another tactic, which is essentially a new fraud tactic is developed, and you keep moving forward through that cycle. But in the context of call spoofing and the fraud that can enable, as soon as that call spoofing is essentially reduced to the point where it's no longer profitable for the fraudsters, they're going to go away and try and find something else, something that's more profitable for them, something that they can make more money off of. And with branded calling, I think it's one element in a wide portfolio of solutions that can be available to market stakeholders that really can reduce the impact of call spoofing moving forward. That's the bit from Juniper Research. What I'm going to do now, I'm going to hand over to Maury Monroe, Vice President of Enterprise Sales at TNS, who's going to take you through TNS's view of the market today.
Sam, really appreciate it. You did an excellent job really capturing the market challenge. I think that TNS, in a nutshell, is here to solve for everything, Sam, that you kind of reviewed here, as it affects enterprises greatly. When Sam moves to the next slide here, you'll see a view of some of the solutions in this, what we'll call voice trust journey. And I think that the journey is very unique because it's not a required path for every enterprise to adopt it identically. You can possibly move straight to a protective solution and maybe add branding or add the telephone number monitoring and health assessment. But it's very important to understand that the journey does start with a phone number. That phone number is really your identification. And if that phone number does have a health assessment of which you can contact TNS, and at any moment we can give you that assessment, it gives you some insight into the potential challenges you may have already unknowingly encountered, or you may know what you need to protect. So the whole objective here is to really restore trust. Obviously that comes with answer rates, but if a call is answered, all of us are subject to the possibility of what Sam was very, very accurately defining as this spoof challenge. When enhanced with AI, I wouldn't be able to discern the possibility that the call isn't authentic. And when we can assist with only allowing calls from origination points that are allowed, that eliminates a spoof concern that could come from anywhere. And simplifying these architectures into authenticated calling is the key component to protecting the end consumer. And again, Sam mentioned brand degradation. Yeah, it's detrimental to these organizations not being trusted that want to contact their customers. So TNS is here to really provide that wrapper. TNS is here to restore trust into a channel that on every business level, the voice conversations are what define a relationship. Texting's great. I'm not saying it's not. But if you genuinely want to connect with your end customers, it has to start with a conversation. And most importantly, a trusted conversation. So Sam, I know there might be, if there are any questions, we're happy to assist. We want to really capture, I'll say, a call enrichment experience with a protected call experience. So TNS is here to certainly promote that, assist in deploying it, and get the confidence back into the voice channel that has so significantly been disrupted, and unfortunately will continue to be until protective measures are put in place. So I want to thank Juniper Research again for an excellent opportunity to look into this challenge and provide TNS an opportunity to solve for the enterprises that look to address it. Sam, thank you.
Thank you very much, Maury. Yeah, completely agree. It's a very, it's a pivotal moment, I think, for the voice channel and then the issues that it's facing. But you know, looking especially what's been going on in the US, it seems like there's a lot to ride on. Unfortunately, we haven't got any questions to answer today. However, in the chat function, there is a Q&A and a message from Juniper. If you'd like to reach out, please do to us, to the email address in there, and we will endeavour to get back to you within 24 hours. However, again, Maury, thank you very much for joining me. It's been a pleasure to discuss the topic, and thank you very much to the audience for joining us today. We hope you have a wonderful rest of your day, and goodbye.
Thank you.